Good afternoon. I'm Katie Merrill. I'm the Director of Admissions. Thank you for joining us today for our information session on our Master's Food and Agriculture Law and Policy. I am going to go ahead and my attendees, I am going to go ahead and promote you to panelists so you can turn on your camera, ask us questions. And you don't have to turn on your camera if you prefer not to, but this gives you a chance. Oh, Walter, that's my favorite name. I went to school with a Walter, so welcome. All right. Okay. Well, good afternoon. Again, I'm Katie Merrill. I'm the Director of Admissions at Vermont Law School. Thank you for joining us. Hello, Trevor. I recognize you from some prior sessions. I'm joined here today by our food and ag team, I would say. It's a big passion in Vermont, and it's probably one of the most important issues that we face is our food sources. I'm joined here by Whitney Shields. She's a teaching fellow in our Center for Agriculture and Food Systems. McKenna Hayes, who's an alum and works for Food Connects, correct? Did I say it correctly? Oh yeah, it's right there in your thing. Monica Collins, who's our Assistant Director of Career Services and specializes in obtaining jobs and helping you find careers in after your master's degree. Kelly Burkett in admissions, and Molly McDowell. She's our environmental communication specialist, and she knows all environmental, like all things environmental. So I wanted to get it started today. I'm going to launch a poll and see where your interest lies in food and agriculture. All right, and you can pick more than one answer. So do you guys see it? Am I seeing any answers? We can answer too. Is it working?
It says that panelists can't vote, so since you made everyone panelists.
No, I made everybody panelists. All right, so maybe in the chat you can our food access and equity, farmland access and land justice, federal policy and regulation, state municipal food policy and regulation, food safety, farm workers' rights, animal welfare, food waste and sustainability, climate smart agriculture. That's what I'm always interested in, that because I think that's such an important issue with our changing climate. Okay, so I'm going to end polling. If you want to go ahead and put any, there's and Shelby, all of the above. Whitney, I'm going to ask you tell us what you're most interested in.
Yeah, food security is kind of my expertise. It's something I did on the international scale and then did domestically. And so that's something that I'm really passionate about. But the great thing about this profession is that, you know, there are new ways to grow into other areas of the food system. So I'm also really interested in farmland access. So that's something that I've been working on with Fran Miller, who is our staff attorney at the Center for Agriculture and Food Systems.
Wonderful. Does anyone else want to kind of tell their passion about what drives them to be interested in food and agriculture law and policy? Trevor, can I put you on the spot?
Sure. It's between the food access and equity and farmers' rights, and I also like the food security issues. So I find that food is, you know, something that we all have a right to, and it seems like there's a lot of areas that need to be thought about in a future perspective of giving equity to people across the board.
I find that compelling, and growing up with not as much access. I grew up in the inner city, and we did not have as much. It was like a food desert. So for me, That's always been an important aspect. And it's part of why I love Vermont so much, because I'm surrounded by small farmers and I feel I have access to fresh eggs and vegetables and meat that's, you know, is sustainably raised. That's a big important part of my journey with food and agriculture. I didn't know, does anyone else have any comments? Should we get this ball rolling? Ready, Whitney?
I am ready. Thanks, Katie. I'm going to share my screen with you all. Okay, and do you see the PowerPoint? Just give me a thumbs up if you can. Great, super, thank you. Hi all, my name is Whitney Shields, and I'm actually the project manager at the Center for Agriculture and Food Systems, which I'm going to refer to as CAFS. And I am also the Vermont Legal Food Hub Program Coordinator. That is a program that we launched last year that I can provide more information on, but also you can feel free to check it out on our website. I'm also a graduate from the MFALP program. So today I'm going to provide an overview of the work we do at CAFS and how you can get involved as a MFALP student. So CAFS uses law and policy to build a more sustainable and just food system. We cultivate future leaders and empower food system stakeholders through education, research, and collaboration. So there are 3 things that we do. The first being we offer a degree, the MFALP degree. We have the Food and Agriculture Clinic, and then we have research opportunities with local, regional, national, and international partners where we develop resources and reports for a variety of different stakeholders. So let's start with the MFALP degree, and it is pronounced MFALP. The MFALP degree is designed for students who want to pursue intensive study and practical training in food and agricultural law and policy. Students engage in innovative work that spans the food system. So we have MFALP students who come from a variety of different backgrounds, rural, suburban, urban, international, who have had experience growing food, distributing food. And so it's really nice to have that diverse background present in the classroom because it provides different perspectives, which can only strengthen laws and policies around food and agriculture. It's the only master's program in the US focused on food law and policy. Courses include food justice and sustainability, food regulation and policy, the Farm Bill, animal welfare law, and many more. If you have any questions about the classes, feel free to reach out to me. I can provide my email address at the end of this. So if you have any questions, we can chat about the classes and expectations. So here's one way you can get involved with CAFS when you become a MFALP. There is the Food and Agriculture Clinic. So many schools, law schools across the country have clinics that focus on a range of topics. It provides law students the opportunity to interact with clients and build practical skills. The Food and Agriculture Clinic is available to law students and master's students, where we collaborate with local, regional, national, and international partners and engage in law and policy work that addresses challenges related to food and agriculture. Through this work, student clinicians apply and refine their skills in legal research and writing while gaining experience in communications, project management, advocacy, and leadership. Another way to get involved with CAFS is to become a research assistant, also known as an RA, or an intern. We work closely with partners to provide legal services that respond to needs, to project partners' needs, and develop resources that empower the communities that our project partners work with. Some of these resources are developed in the clinic, and others are developed by the CAFS team. As a MFALP student, you can apply to become a research assistant or intern, where you will work closely with a CAFS team member on a specific project. This is a great opportunity to strengthen legal research and writing skills. So on the left-hand side, you can see a list of different projects that we have developed. I urge you to go to our website to see the full list of projects we are working on and to check in every few months as we are publishing a lot of projects, particularly in the beginning of 2021. We also have a list on the right-hand side, a list of partners that we work with. Again, this isn't the full list, so I recommend you check out our website to see everyone that we work with. And I do want to bring up, there's one other opportunity to work with us at CAFS. As an MFALP student, you are given an option to do an advanced writing course or an independent research project. So picking one of those or doing an externship. I did both the AWR, the advanced writing requirement, which is something that I developed and it was a really good writing sample for me. And then I also did an independent research project, an IRP, working with Lori Baranavan, who is the director of CAFS, and she assisted me in helping guide me through that process. So if you are interested in taking an academic approach, or you want to be able to develop a really solid writing sample when you leave, I highly recommend thinking about doing an AWR and or an IRP, and we can connect you to faculty who can assist you and guide you through that process, depending on the area of practice. So I'd like to take a few minutes to just open it up and answer any questions that you may have. You can put your answers in the chat, or you can unmute yourself and we can try a little bit now. I do want to point out our website as well as our blog. And we also have an Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. If you want to see kind of what's going on, not only in Vermont, but with some of our project partners, I highly recommend checking us out on social media. We try to engage with people there, and it's a really great way to see what's going on in the food and agriculture world. So I will open it up for questions.
Again, all, if you want, you can put your questions in the chat. I've promoted everyone to panelists, so if you wanted to unmute, you can ask your question. You can also be on camera, however you feel comfortable. Whitney, I have a question, and maybe McKenna too. What was your most rewarding class? Was there a specific class that shifted your focus in food and agriculture?
Yeah, it's hard to say because I really enjoyed a lot of our classes. I think the one that was most impactful for me was the Farm Bill class. McKenna, I don't know if you took that class too, but that was really a way to look at the Farm Bill, this huge piece of legislation that really is in charge of how our food system works and how it's regulated. And getting an understanding of all the complexities that surround that. So that class I really enjoyed.
Yeah, that was my favorite class too, actually. And it's just so interesting because it explains so much about why the way we are with our food system. And it's like the history of it. And there's so many things that, I don't know, you never really read about or hear about. And I mean, when you take the time to dive into the Farm Bill, it's really big. So to go through it section by section and break it down and just really understand why that has developed the food system the way that it has was really, really interesting. All the classes are really interesting, just learning about the food system, because everyone is connected to the food system in some way, at least by eating, right? So it's all super connected, and all the classes help to show that.
I want to do a shameless plug. Molly, if you could like zip in the link to our podcast, because we had a podcast on the modern Farm Bill, and it was very informative. It at least gives you a taste of this big, huge, ever-changing, massive controlling aspect of our day-to-day lives. So it will give you a real good point of reference to get you started, to get you excited. Now, for our master students, when you jump in, Whitney, as a master student and you're with JD students, how was it? How was coming to law school and jumping right into law and policy?
Yeah, that's a really great question. I also want to stress that I took a very big break in between my undergrad and getting my MFALP degree. So I was out of school for over 6 years. And so getting back into school and, you know, that was something to adjust to. With JD students, you know, we have a year. Some people take longer, but I did my master's degree residential for a year and then online for a year. And we are in classes with JD students who are a year or 2 years ahead, where they've taken multiple legal classes. And so it can feel at first a little overwhelming. But what I realized is, as long as I do the readings and have the courage to interact and to participate in the class, take advantage of the hours, office hours that all professors provide, that I was able to keep up with JD students. And so I feel as though it just takes a moment and maybe a month or so to get over it. And then after a while, it gets pretty, I'm not going to say easy, but it gets easier to feel like you're going to be successful, even though you may not have had as much legal classes as the JDs in your class.
What is a typical day like when you're on campus, and how many hours a week were you working just on studies?
Well, I guess it depends on the person. So I guess for me, it was a full-time job. I started off taking only 9 credits because, like I said, I was out of school for a while, and so I didn't want to overload myself in my first semester. And so it was a full-time job. I mean, I woke up at 7 o'clock, started my day, would go to classes, afternoons and evenings were spent studying or producing work. I worked at the library, which is something I highly recommend to everybody. Working at the library is such a treat because it forces you to sit in this quiet space and do your work. And it was really great to work with the folks there. So that's kind of how I approached it. How did you do it, McKenna?
Pretty similar to you. So I also took a few years off between undergrad and grad school, and I agree with your assessment, Wendy. It can be a little overwhelming the first couple of weeks, and I think a lot of it comes down to the jargon too, and the language that you just aren't used to speaking or reading in some of the reading assignments. But like basically exactly what he said, you take advantage of the opportunity, ask for help. I asked a lot of questions, and then I started to understand the answers, and by a week or two maybe like a month in, I was totally comfortable asking questions and just participating in classes. So for me, I did 1 full year residential, and then I did an externship, a local externship for half a year. So I did a year and a half for my degree. And then for the year I was on campus, classes, a lot of time in the library reading. I did also bartend on the side on the weekends. So could balance a few other things, but I think I was in like 3 or 4 classes a semester. Does that sound about right? I can't exactly remember, but yeah. And it was a solid chunk of work. Like, I was glad I had my space cleared out to do the work.
Monica, you have your hand up.
Yes, so I'd like to echo a lot of what McKenna and Whitney said. I was a MFALP before they had the MFALP. And so it did take a little while to get used to the language. It is a different language. It's a different way of thinking, especially when you come from the humanities like I did. So it took a little bit of time to adjust to that, and always had to make sure I had my reading done, and that I talked to professors whenever I had questions. And then I interacted with a lot of the JDs. I was friends with JDs. I relied on the rest of my master's class as well. We still are a very close-knit group, and I graduated like 17 years ago. So we still stay in touch, and yeah, we would study together pretty much all the time. The library was my second home, and I lived about 45 minutes, still live 45 minutes away. So yeah, that's everything that McKenna and Whitney mentioned is all true.
All true. There is a question in the chat, and it's Whitney. It's hello, Whitney. As a budding student wanting to join the MFALP study, the clinic seems ideal for hands-on exposure. My question is, along with what you have already shared, I'm wondering if you may recommend some resources for prior experience and organization within other states to get things rolling before joining the program. What is it like a day in the life in the clinic for master students?
Yeah, so in addition to your studies, you also, in the clinic, you are required to work 20 hours a week. And that includes research, writing, meeting with the clinic supervisor, Sophia Krzyzewski, or other supervisors that we have on staff, your project partners. What's really great about the clinic is you build your work plan. It's very much a place for you to be able to exercise the skills you already have with project management, with communication, any kind of office experience you may have had previously, and applying it and just building upon it. So it's a really good place to build upon a basic foundation of professional life and professional working. In regards to your question, Trevor, did I answer your question, or is there something more specific you're looking for?
Yeah, well, I'm in Texas right now, and I'm not a native to here. So there's a lot of organizations within Austin, and I know that they have contacts with like Think Tank and like Food Tank and some of the bigger national kind of organizations. And I've been hesitant to get involved because I'm, you know, I really don't know what, there's so many options, and it's, you know, I don't want to waste my time without having some real prior focus. And so I'm trying to narrow that down. And so my question is kind of, you know, regarding hands-on work that you might think would also be, and you touched on some of that with a couple of the programs you mentioned. What is it, the AWR and the PIR, if I got those right. You know, it might just even be soft skills that you could touch on, like the writing. But I'm also thinking, you know, just getting the foot in the door is also a big step to bring the momentum. So yeah. I'm just looking for any sort of organizations that anybody might have worked with that you can recommend as a starting point. I haven't been involved with any NGOs over here at all, so.
Yeah, that's a really good question. And honestly, it seems like there are a lot of options, and that to narrow it down, I think coming to the program, asking yourself that will be really helpful, and talking to Lori Baranovan, who's the director of CAS, as well as Monica Collins, who's at Career Services and who's on this call. I think that will really help you narrow your focus more while you're doing your studies. In regards you know, our project partners, we connect with them through developing resources and projects and going to conferences and our, you know, different networks. And so that's how we make these connections. And we're always looking to connect with potential project partners. If there's you know, there's always an opportunity where, you know, that an organization that a clinician has worked for may be interested in hiring them to continue to do certain work. That has happened in the past. So it is a good way to get your foot in the door, in that you have a writing sample, that you have gained more experience, and that you've expanded your network.
Yeah, I've been looking at, I know there's a lot of internships, you know, unpaid internships in different organizations about food issues. So I'm glad to hear that, because I've really been considering that as getting a writing sample in my improving my soft skills. Thank you.
I also think, and Monica, we can slide into career outcomes and how you assist master students on their journey, and maybe tie in what Trevor can do now to get ready for school this fall. I think a lot of it is exploration, Trevor, too. If there's an NGO that you're passionate about, give them a call, set up a time, explore it, ask if you can volunteer. And like any little bit you do will help gain knowledge. So, pick a winner, call them up. But Monica, can you go into a little more detail?
Sure. So first, I just wanted to share my path because it's relevant, just really briefly. So I have an MSCL, and before they changed the name to MELP and MFALP and all of the different degrees that we have now, it was called the Masters of Environmental Law. And luckily they changed it so that it actually reflects what the degree is. But because there was no focus in food issues, I kind of like created my own focus while I was at VLS. I had worked on farms. I'd had run CSAs. I opened the food co-op in South Royalton. That's about to turn 20, which I'm really psyched about. And have always been involved in local agriculture here in Vermont. So that was a passion for me. And I was able to do a couple of IRPs, two IRPs. I wish I had done an externship, but at the time, food security was not that big a focus. And this was before the local ag movement really hit Vermont. So this was like early 2000s. I focused a lot on community gardens, school gardens, and that sort of thing. But I found that doing IRPs was really helpful in getting that more focused work on what I was going to do. I didn't eventually work in food and ag, but in my outside work from VLS, I actually just started a nonprofit this summer called Feeding the Valley Alliance, where we work on food security issues here in our valley. And in addition to that, we worked with master's students. We were able to kind of use that connection to have them help us do, we had 2 MFALPs help us do a food access survey of our community. So those are the types of things that you can actually tap into while you're a student here. But I would also, just to kind of elaborate on what Whitney was saying about getting involved with organizations. Before you come to school, it's great if you have a network that you've started to develop, because your networks is where you find most of your jobs. I've heard a statistic that 80% of jobs are word of mouth. And it really comes through those relationships that you build. And a great way to build those relationships is by volunteering in your own community. If that's where you end up wanting to stay after you're done with your education, to have a built-in network is going to be a leg up on any other applicants. And you may even be able to create your own position because people know you and they know what your particular focuses are. So I agree with what Katie said, reach out and volunteer if you have the ability to do that, the time to do that. That's a great way to get to know people. And local organizations are more connected to national organizations than they have been in the past. This pandemic has accelerated that, but even before that, they're part of professional organizations. They know each other, they know each other's work. So, there's always somebody who knows what's going on somewhere else. So it's a great way to start getting involved. So in terms of how we work with students, I usually meet with students at the beginning of the semester. We're trying to figure out, I love to have online students reach out to me as well. If there are any online students on this webinar, it doesn't always happen because they often have careers that they're already working in, but please, by all means, reach out to us. I love working with online students. And then I start helping, well, we meet right at the beginning and I help you plan your first semester. If you're a residential student, if you're an online student, Genevieve Nichols helps you with that part. And then we just start helping you develop, maybe not that first semester. The first semester you have the opportunity to take different classes that meet your requirements, but that also kind of open you up to different classes that you might not have thought you were interested in, but sound cool when you get here. So then after towards the end of the first semester, I'll meet with you again, touch base, see how you're doing so we can plan your second semester. What you may have wanted to do at the beginning of your first semester for that second semester may have changed. Happens all the time. People come in, I want to focus on water, and then they discover energy or they discover something else. And so, so it's nice to have that little bit of time to figure out what your interests are once you've been exposed to all these new things. But because you're here for such a short time, I really try to get you to focus in on a not necessarily a specialty, but at least a direction. And not just a direction in terms of what you want to study, but also starting to help you get to where you want to be geographically. Like, let's say you want to be in DC, we start, trying to help you develop those relationships, make connections with alums, try and look at those organizations that you might try to get maybe an externship with. And an externship is a great way, it's an internship, it's just a different terminology that we use. That's a great way to get some real world experience doing what you may want to do, or realizing that that's not really what you want to do, because that's important too. But then besides that, I try to really stay in touch with everybody and try to help them develop what those focuses and your goals might be. It's easy to get overwhelmed with choice when you get here, but I'm here to help you narrow that down. Katie, you're muted.
I know my screen was moving, everybody, and so I went to unmute myself and then I muted you. Whitney, did you want to comment on what Monica was explaining?
I do. Yeah, I just want to take a quick second to just say career services, as soon as you arrive at VLS, go to career services. I mean, I cannot tell you how helpful it was to have, I mean, these are folks who are like, yeah, we want to work with you to get a job as soon as possible. And so that was really comforting to me. I wanted to stay in Vermont, even though I moved out from a different state. And so that really helped. And actually it was through meeting Monica that I got the job right after my first year of my master's program. So I just really, really want to stress the importance of taking advantage of career services and all the services that they provide, because they're there to help you succeed. So take advantage of it. Thanks.
I think Trevor has his hand up.
Yeah, just to go off of what Monica was mentioning with the placement and trying to help students, if they're interested in a certain area after school, does that also include like fellowships or anything like that?
Yes, I try to sell you guys on fellowships all the time. People don't always know what fellowships are, so I definitely include fellowship. I do a weekly career notes newsletter in which I have a whole section devoted just to fellowships. But I just want to be clear that we're not a placement office. We give you the tools you need to find that job, and we're there for you to help you with developing your resume, working on your application materials, and then giving you guidance in terms of interviewing, and we offer the opportunity to pair you with an alum to try and help you do mock interviews if you need to, if you want to practice your interview before you go there. That's been really helpful for students.
I have a question in the chat, Monica, and
Sure.
my dogs are going to start to bark. I'm just giving the forewarning. On the heels of post-degree work, I'd like to ask about the work that students experience after VLS. What is more common, students going to work with already established businesses or using their degree to complement business plans, like starting a restaurant? I know people have done that, farm, or other food-related community projects. Personal example, keeping this difference in mind, are there classes at VLS that complement one path or another? Wow, good question.
We have students doing quite a variety of things. We have students working, or grads working in restaurants. We have grads working on farms. We have grads working for nonprofits, which tends to be the highest number of graduates go to nonprofits, both small and large. We have some people who have augmented the skill set they already had. And for instance, we have one graduate who was always an independent public radio producer, and she always had been really heavily involved in local agriculture, and she continues to do that work now. And I think she just published a book not too long ago, and she's a fairly recent grad, but she had also brought a lot of experience with her. And that's something that I really want to touch on is, if, like Whitney mentioned and McKenna, I also had been out of school for a while. I was a little bit older than they were when they came to school, but it took, I always ask you all to evaluate those transferable skills that you bring. Because you can't, I mean, if you bring a lot of work experience with you, that's important, that's valuable to an employer. It is a matter of how we incorporate that into your resume. Sometimes when I have a student come to me and say, I haven't been getting interviews, I will talk to them and say, have you had me review your application materials? Perhaps we should sit down and look at those. And usually after we review those application materials and make sure they are the best they can be to show the prospective employers what skills they bring, then that's when you start getting interviews. And the interview, your resume opens the door. Your cover letter gets you that interview, and then your interview is what gets you your job. So I really try to work with you to understand that progression and to understand that you should not discount the skills that you brought from a previous career path, perhaps. So I sometimes have people come in and say, I'm making a career pivot. And so they feel like they need to throw out everything that they did beforehand. And that's not true, at least it's not my philosophy.
Thank you. McKenna, do you want to talk a little bit about your journey and your career and how you found your position?
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. So right now, I am the co-director of the Food Connects Food Hub. We are based in Brattleboro, Vermont. So a food hub, there's many different kinds of food hub. We are aggregation and distribution food hub, meaning we aggregate food from different farms, bring it into our warehouse, and then we put that food out, we sell it to wholesale customers. We do not do any repacking of the food. So pretty much boxes come in, the boxes go out. We're not doing any CSA boxes or food boxes, direct to consumer food boxes. We pretty much sell to all wholesale customers, and we are not usually selling to the final eater. So we are selling to folks that are reselling the product or cooking the product and then, serving it. So schools, hospitals, co-ops, general stores, insert wholesale market here, and we are probably selling to them. We also do a lot of work with other food hubs and are building a quite interesting food hub network actually through the whole country. It's quite something. I have been at Food Connects for about 3 years and I've worked on my way up to this position. Let's see, what else about Food Connects? So we hit $1 million in sales this year. We doubled sales 2 years ago. Yeah, big deal. Doubled sales again through COVID. We've been an essential service. Things have been super busy for us, but it's also really just highlighted opportunities in the food chain and, the need for resilience and small supply chains. Let's see, we sell to almost 200 customers. We work with about 135 regional producers. So we're trying to think of things regionally. Mostly everything we bring in is about within a 50-mile radius to a 100-mile radius. We do source some stuff from further away, and same with our sales. We pretty much deliver at about a 100-mile radius. Again, that's getting a little different as we start to move food through these different food hub networks. So that changes the definition a little bit. My path. So I graduated, I was in the first MFALP cohort. So, so I started in 2016 and then graduated the following winter, 2017, did a full year residential on campus where I live right in South Royalton. And then I did a semester of an externship in Rutland, which is very close to South Royalton. I'm born and raised in Vermont. So I was not living in South Royalton at the time. I was living in Killington, which is, very close to South Royalton. Prior to deciding to go to VLS, I was working in Boston, working for this company, Ahold USA, which they own a lot of grocery store chains. So if you've ever seen Stop and Shops or Giant grocery stores, anything like that, basically same company that owns Hannaford's owns these grocery stores. So I was working for that company, doing a lot of their sustainable supply chain work and corporate responsibility, and I wasn't getting the answers I wanted. So I wanted to go back to school and find out more about why things out of our food system are the way they are. Why was I being told these things? Why was our supply chain work? Like it didn't add up to me. So I was already planning to move back to Vermont. My sister was at VLS, so I joined her at VLS, and it very nicely coincided with the first MFALP program. And, it's interesting, we keep talking about volunteering and doing that thing. I'm kind of like the poster child of volunteering and then getting the job. So when I was at VLS, I was gleaning and volunteering with this food nonprofit in Rutland, which turned into my externship, which turned into a job with them. I also at the same time was doing an unpaid internship at Food Tank. Trevor, you mentioned Food Tank there. Really big food think tank, cover lots of stuff, all sorts of scales. So I started with them doing an unpaid internship and then ended up actually as their editorial director for a couple years with that job. And then I moved from that position to Food Connects in Brattleboro. And I just I made that change because I wanted to work more locally. Like I just wanted to be more connected to local networks that were in my community and do work that was in my community. So yeah, so I landed at Food Connects and it's been a wild ride. We're growing really, really fast. It's really cool stuff that we've been doing. And I've used my degree in so many different ways. I was trying to capture that poll you did in the beginning, Katie, about, you know, all the things I think I very specifically use. I couldn't get down the whole list, but the hat I wear as co-director here, one of the things I do is do all of the hub's regulatory compliance. So all of our licensing, permitting, all of our certifications, and also manage our food safety plan, which is a lot of different regulations and the relationships between them and managing the gray area between them, which food hubs tend to fall into. So, you know, the municipal, state, federal regulations, just making sure that we're doing everything we have to do for that. And then we also are able to help producers meet the regulations that they need to meet to be able to sell through different networks and access wholesale markets. So there's definitely different regulatory threshold you have to meet to sell into various markets, especially to break into the wholesale market. But if you can help a producer break into the wholesale market, they can sell a lot more food. And it's, you know, it's, if that's what they want to do, we help producers access those markets. Also do a lot with food access and equitable food access. So food safety, federal food policy, lots of stuff like that. And I've actually been very lucky in this role to work with CAFs on the other side of the conversation. Thankfully, we were able to get some support last year, and a couple of students helped us with a regulatory assessment of of the food hub. And yeah, really, really helpful stuff. Really helped us get our leg up on our food safety plan and make sure all of our operations were in compliance. And we've grown a lot. So there was a lot of stuff, you know, we were bumped into different thresholds of regulations that we weren't necessarily aware of. So a big role that you know, it was almost a need that we didn't know we had until we hired me, and I was like, huh, this doesn't look right. Like, I think we should ask about this, or are we sure we can store food like this? Like, I think we need to check on it. So that getting a lot of that stuff cleaned up allowed us to grow, allowed us to really be prepared to meet the needs of COVID when we were thrust into that situation last March. And yeah, I just continue to draw on my degree and especially the networks all the time. I have a lot of legal questions, and I tend to email someone at BLS with them and just ask like, hey, what do you think about this? Have you guys had any experience with this? And then it's kind of interesting. We're working, so the Food Hub network I mentioned earlier, we're starting to toy with the idea of, okay, what does it look like to have, you know, and that's for example of one cool project I'm working on right now is like, what would it look like to have a shared food safety network for inter-hub transactions all across the US? And so we know that if you're selling from one hub to another in this network, that we're all meeting the same shared standards and things like that, and how that could look and how that could actually be implemented and then shared with the producers across the country. So that's one really cool thing I'm working on. I can keep talking anything about Food Connects or my degree. So if you guys have specific questions, I could totally open it up, or I can just keep talking, whatever you guys want, really.
I'm actually really interested in how the difference between when you came from the corporate sector to the more sustainable sector, and do you see parallels? Do you see where's the big difference? And
that's a really good question. Yeah, so I am very, very appreciative of my time in the private sector at that job, because it, you know, those types of supply chains, that type of food access, like that's never going to go away, right? Like you're always going to have big grocery stores, but are there things they can do to be more sustainable, more equitable? Yes. Are they working on it? Yes. But I found it to be a little too slow for what I wanted to be doing. Some things didn't always align with my decision-making compass. So that's definitely a part of why I was like, I just want to learn more about why. I mean, if comparing nonprofit to for-profit, you know, it's very different. I feel like I don't have time to waste at this job. Like I'm doing stuff all the time that matters. And at that job, I felt like I was sometimes just sitting at my desk, like, okay, like got to stay here till 5 p.m. just because I have to. And my boss is watching me, and here I'm like, okay, like it's 5 p.m. How did that even happen? Or, I mean, maybe not unfortunate, but just reality of for-profit to nonprofit. Like you're probably never going to make as much money working in a nonprofit sector. And that's just, I mean, maybe you will, maybe you won't, but that's a thing to just know. Yeah, I think I'm just more cut out for this type of industry. I mentioned my sister earlier. She also went to VLS. She did the water program, and she's actually at the Department of Ag right now. So she took it a little bit different way and is working more on policy work. And the way I kind of think about it is some folks work on policy. I'm on the other side of the policy. Like I'm interpreting it, I'm applying it to the real day-to-day of some of these operations and things like that. But the fact that I can read statutes, that I know where to look for research, that I can interpret things from my education at BLS is really helpful for Food Connects and for a lot of the work going on down here, because we can do some, I mean, I'm not a lawyer, like I can't sign off on a contract, but I can look at it and say, this looks kind of funny. Like I think we need to ask for some support on this contract or on this, license or something like that. Did you have more specific questions on that, Katie, about, yeah.
It is really fascinating. I'm like, okay, so how does it get here? How do you get your source, and where does it get sold to?
Yeah, supply chains are really interesting. And I think that, you asked what are we most interested in? And I think I've always been interested in supply chains, and I mean, all the things that go along with it. But yeah.
Does anyone else have any questions or comments? Whitney, Monica, student panel.
Would it be possible to have shared contact information if we wanted to reach out for specific questions?
Yeah.
Certainly. If you all want to, McKenna, do you mind putting your email in the chat?
Not at all.
What I really love about our master's program is McKenna touched on it, is she's very deep in regulations and supply chain. And then her sister is doing the policy. There's so many different facets where you can use this degree. And then when you have your interests, you work with Monica and you work with Whitney, and they will hone, all right, you're interested in this, let's do an externship, and then maybe base a research project or your writing requirement. So you come, when you are out of school, you have some extra tools, and you also have an idea of, oh, I want to do this. And I know, Whitney, you were an environmental paralegal prior, is that right?
Yeah, so I have been a paralegal since 2014, and I was originally a criminal defense paralegal in Orleans Parish in New Orleans, Louisiana. And then Monica actually who worked at Lang, Roxbury & Wool in Middlebury, Vermont. It's a fantastic law firm, plaintiffs-focused law firm. She was leaving to actually start her position at Career Services. And I was a student at Vermont Law School, and we connected, and I was hired for the position. And so we worked primarily on an environmental lawsuit that takes place in southern Vermont, as well as a few other, cases around personal injury, elder abuse, etc. So it was good to have a paralegal background. It's particularly helpful in talking to attorneys. I have found, and as McKenna said, looking at documents and being like, something feels off about this. Is this right? So that's definitely been helpful in my position, particularly as the Vermont Legal Food Hub program coordinator. That's really been helpful, where I wear more of a paralegal hat in that position.
I'd like to add a little to what Whitney said. Whitney I was on a phone call with Whitney, and there was just something about her presence that was coming through even in the phone call that made me think, this is the person who needs to take over my job. Because the firm had already heard that I was leaving, and they were freaking out because I was the only paralegal working on this really large environmental, it's a PFOA or PFAS case in the Bennington area. And if you want to Google that, it's a really important case that's affecting the nation in terms of how it's proceeding. Yeah, she was the perfect person to take over. And they were sad to lose her too. They were like, stop taking people away from us. So we do actually have VLS grads working in that firm now. I think there's at least one, but there have been quite a few that have cycled through the firm. But one of the things that Whitney touched on is just a really important part of what makes our master's degree so special is that you have the ability to work with attorneys and to translate those legal concepts into bite-sized pieces that can be really more accessible to the general public. And I think that's one of the most important functions of what you leave here with. That's a special skill. You don't have to be a lawyer to do the things that you want to do. And having that legal education helps you be a better advocate in whatever realm you choose.
McKenna, did you want to add something? Your hand's up too.
Yeah, I just had Whitney made a couple comments I wanted to add on, and then actually Monica, you just made some good comments too. But Whitney mentioned looking at documents, and just I think one thing that I do really well is I might not know all the answers, but I can tell when there's a question, and I'm like, okay, we need to find out more about this. So learning how to ask or just how to identify those things just by reading a document has been something I can contribute to BLS. Also, you mentioned Legal Food Hub, and Food Connects has been lucky enough is doing some work with Legal Food Hub in terms of legal support. So that's another great connection. And I think that's a really important thing is like the connection. So I had someone tell me once, when I was at Food Tank, we were doing a conference in DC, and I saw a friend of mine who's, he's working down there in actually food system stuff, but he said something, he was like, oh, you're from VLS. The VLS mafia is everywhere. And he literally said that to me because there's always people from VLS who are working in all these different organizations and places, and I mean, all across the board. So even if it's not someone you know off the bat, like they're gonna support you. And it's just a really great network to have all over the country. Like you always see VLS, whether the JDs or master's degree student, people just peppered everywhere you look. At least, I mean, professionally, a lot of the places I come across, there do tend to be some VLS connections there. Monica, I forgot what I was going to say in response to you. So you must have covered it great. if it already lost my mind.
Thank you, McKenna. Well, it is almost 3 o'clock, and a big thank you to everyone for joining us today. It was really enlightening, and I really enjoyed it. Thank you, Whitney, McKenna, Monica, Molly, Kelly, and Veronica snuck on the call. And thank you for our attendees. Really appreciate you joining us. It's a great degree. I'm really happy, and it's so good to see McKenna. I didn't realize you were the first class, and now it's so unbelievable I'm so proud, because one thing that you made such a good point about, you know when to question, and I think that's big. That's a huge thing. So I'm proud of you. And
Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
All right, well, wonderful. Thank you all. If you need anything, please don't hesitate to email me. I really appreciate it. And
Yeah,
thanks.
same here. Feel free to email me.
Thanks, Walter, Trevor, Sanan. Let's see who else is on here. I think everybody's hopped off, but all right, everybody take care. Have a good day.
Bye.
Bye.